Humans love maps, but perhaps more than that, we love the quirks and the curiosities that we find on them.
We're talking about the imaginative world of inherited ideas.
We've often mapped lands that don't exist, searching for lost worlds and lost civilizations and treasures, and perhaps more innocently mapping things we think are going to be constructed. I could and do spend hours looking for fascinations, things I've never seen before, and that's pretty much how this journey started. A coffee and a journey into what the world might have looked like from the eyes of the Romans. I set up a script and some maps and decided to walk a Roman road to tell the journey. This one just here runs through this ancient forest here. I was probably a little bit further to the south when I made that video, but I missed something. I missed a projection on that map. I've missed a really significant mistake. But now I'm drawn back to this one here, and we have a very dramatic Scotland. It's 90 degrees in the wrong direction, so did a cartographer just get this wrong and make a mistake? No, there were more, lots more. Here's another, and another, and another, and if I date all of these, we seem to be spanning hundreds of years. And even if we step into the medieval world of wonderful maps, well, we still seem to have Scotland facing the wrong way. In fact, this one we seem to chop it off altogether, but fear not, 1507, we're back with Wonky Scotland. The more I delved into this, the more it just felt like someone grabbed Scotland and just shoved it on its side. And everyone is doing this. The Dutch, the Germans, Mercator himself in 1538, showing us a wonky Scotland. What exactly is going on here? Okay, two maps. A large one of the British Isles, or specifically Scotland, and of course the problematic one. It's almost like it does resemble the coastline. It's like this is correct. We have all the details, the inlets, the estuaries. They're broadly in the right place. They're just facing the wrong way. So let's give this some context, because there are two significant elephants in the room. I often talk of Pytheas, a Greek explorer, 325 BCE. He described the British Isles, Britannia, land of the painted people, as a triangle. No mention of wonky Scotland, 325 BCE. And then we have this. This is the Goth map, something like 1360 to 1390, supposedly made by monks that lived in the southeast of England. Now, it seems they have this right, mainly. So why are we seeing on my timeline at least 200 years of wonky Scotland after this, when we seem to know that it's not wonky at all? Okay folks, this is the type of mystery I absolutely love. Why exactly do we have 1500 years or so of a mapped wonky Scotland when people living here, including a whole bunch of monks, seemingly knowing exactly which way Scotland should have been facing and a pretty good idea of the geography? Let's dig deep. Okay, so it's time to introduce our first main character of the day, Ptolemy, a Greek Romano everything, astronomer, mathematician, and importantly for us, a geographer. So let's head to 150 CE. He wrote Geographia. Now you could almost see this as a handbook, a set of instructions on how to draw maps of the real world. Now in book 2 we have perhaps the most single useful thing, 8,000 place names, of which over 6,000 coordinates. Now he relied on others before him, but he was bringing this data together. Now this is important because Ptolemy didn't actually draw maps. What he produced was an image. It was something far more powerful: numbers. What Ptolemy gives us with Geographia is a system, a framework, a set of instructions for turning the world into coordinates, so people could then draw their own maps from that. The key for us though is book 3. Now we're learning how to create maps of the inhabited world, and it spans 180 degrees of longitude, 80 degrees of latitude. And now we are plotting 6,000 locations in Britain. Not lines, not coastlines, just points. Now, knowledge of coastlines came from various sources and perhaps Ptolemy's notes, so we can join some dots together. But look what is happening. You see, the distances that Ptolemy had between each location, they do work, but he made them around 4 to 5 degrees too far north. That's a few hundred miles. And now all of a sudden they don't work. So the geographers of the time, well, they had some options because they knew broadly that Scotland didn't look like this. Well, first up, number one, we reject Ptolemy. Shouldn't really do that, that's quite bad. Number two, well, we move all the places around. Again, that would be rejecting Ptolemy and didn't work. Number three, of course, we just take Scotland, stick it sideways, and all of a sudden everything seems to work and fit. So from 150 CE onwards, for 1500 years we have wonky Scotland, but why ever are we not looking to fix this? This isn't just a lazy mistake, this isn't someone getting north and east confused, this is a deliberate choice made again and again to preserve a system that raises so many questions in itself, largely because everything we've just seen only really works if nobody knew better. And that's where things probably get a little bit uncomfortable, because whilst these Ptolemy Scotlands are being copied, we already have maps like the Goth map, probably monks possibly working from itineraries, distances and lived experience. And look at that, it's not perfect, far from it, but Scotland is Scotland, facing the right way. The relationship between England and Scotland feels correct. So at this point, the problem is no longer ignorance, it's something else. Because these two maps aren't competing on accuracy, they're competing on authority. The Goth map knows Britain, and Ptolemy, well, he knew the world. And in medieval and Renaissance Europe, that distinction seems to matter more than being right. The Goth map can tell you how to get from London to Carlisle or London to Exeter. Ptolemy can tell you where London sits in the cosmos, and when you're building a worldwide view, not just a route, that carries an enormous weight. This is why Scotland existed for so long as a wonky land. It just protruded sideways out of the top of England instead of doing what it should do. Each time a new copy was produced, it reinforced that. Instead of asking the question, it actually just validated what it had copied before. This had to stop. Something eventually had to change because the authority wouldn't be enough. But what happened next? That was incredibly strange. By this point, you might expect the story to end. We've seen the problem, we've seen better local knowledge, and we've even seen how the mistake actually works. And historically, there is no better candidate for movement than the Renaissance. And that's why what happens next is really rather strange. Because the Renaissance doesn't reject Ptolemy, it embraces it, and suddenly his coordinates aren't just old, they're classical, they're authoritative. It appears in beautiful atlases engraved with care, sold to scholars and merchants and princes, and here's the uncomfortable part. By now, many of these cartographers know that Scotland doesn't look like this. Correcting Ptolemy now wouldn't just mean updating a map, it would mean rewriting antiquity, and that, it turns out, it's a much harder thing to do. Which means the real undoing of this mistake isn't going to come from a scholar or a monk or even a cartographer. In fact, the undoing of this mistake is something that's far less philosophical. So even after this happens, the Goth map, well, we still carry on persisting with that notion of wonky Scotland, but change was around the corner. It's going to come from instruments, not from arguments, but from measurements, because slowly and unevenly parts of the world are being inherited and start being checked. Distances are no longer taken solely from books, they're walked and counted and measured again and again, and angles are taken where they can be taken from: hilltops, towers, coastlines, already familiar to those that live there. This isn't perfect measurement, it isn't modern surveying, but it's enough for different measurements to begin agreeing with each other, even when Ptolemy's numbers did not. So there is no place when this just stops. There's no big announcement, there's nothing to suggest that we're going to stop using what the ancients did and they were all wrong. Instead, something a little bit quieter happens. So Scotland doesn't magically just snap back into place, it eases back, map by map, region by region. The old Ptolemy Scotlands don't disappear overnight, they linger in atlases, they're reprinted but they're labelled as ancient. And that is when the mistake finally ends, because the greatest mapping mistake of all time was never really about Scotland. It's about what happens when a system built on authority outlives the evidence that supports it, and all of a sudden we have to start mapping on a much more regional scale. And then, however imperfectly all these lines that we see in the landscape, however imperfectly they are mapped, well, the map has to listen.